still so thin. He's gained 11 pounds in 3 years.
Wow.
Well, didn't you lose that amount in like 2 weeks?
Yeah. yeah.
Got it.
I've done 11 pounds so far in this thing.
Nice. I wish
Not
now
that anybody cares, but
I was like, I'm not doing that. Like they wanted me to like take pictures and do all this stuff when I started. And I was like, I'm not doing that. It's fucking stupid. And then for this challenge, you had to be in the challenge. So I started doing it. And then now I'm like, God, because I was already down 14 pounds when I took my before pictures.
why does this never work for me?
I don't know. We're live. We are
Fucking hate
live
this.
right now.
We are livers. Here we go. There we are. Oh,
How does everybody get there before me? I can't.
Nobody else has a problem. Look at them rolling on in.
What do I do wrong? What do I do wrong, Bob?
I don't know.
This isn't a. I know this seems like an ongoing bit every week that I can't find the, but it's not. It's true.
Hit live.
Literally every fucking time.
Hit refresh at the top, maybe.
This computer does not. It never wants to find it for me. I'm in Chrome. Do you want me in Chrome? Do you want me in Safari?
I don't know. I don't know why you don't understand how technology works.
I don't. I wish this wasn't an ongoing thing for me.
Try hitting subscribe over on the right.
I'm not signed in.
Oh, well, that might help.
Fuck signing in.
Is there like a visit channel page?
You shut up. Let's just go all the way back.
I'm going to talk to these people, these nice people that are on YouTube.
Valeria, your boss is going to let you stay through the whole thing today.
That's nice of her. I'll put this over here.
Don't forget that Valeria's boss.
I know, that's why it's so funny.
Look, I just signed in and still
ASMR
nothing.
I'm just gonna slice in.
I literally, this video came up and I had to look down to see what I was wearing. I'm like, is that? Nope, that's not today.
Not today. So Zach's done screwing around.
I give up. I just never gonna see the fucking
do
video.
you have an account you can sign into?
Yeah, but I don't know what my password is. I don't know what any of that stuff is.
Dumb.
If I was on my phone,
how do you generally get in? I don't know what you usually do.
I do this.
Oh, well, that doesn't work.
Clearly.
There you go.
Go over here. Let's see what's on this one.
Yeah, try that one. Janet doesn't have any problem. Janet, what is your process for getting into the live?
Well, what I do is I open my phone and then I click on the live.
Okay.
And that's it.
Just open the phone, then click right on the live. Live? No, that's
Kaylin says Kaylin accidentally wore the Tessie Evidence shirt to a Zoom meeting with her boss's boss last week, but luckily thought it was funny.
Well, that's good. I feel like
Thanks,
you're spam clicking, and if you scroll a little bit, you might. It's like you like the main page. This is what's going on over here. The main page pops up, and he looks at it for 1 second and goes, fuck, and he just clicks out of it. like hit the little arrow to the right over there. Did you find?
Now I'm in a different video. Hold on. That's 30 fucking.
I should have watched that ad. I think I got paid for that.
What do you want me to click on?
I don't know. Channels.
Oh, guys. We don't have that much time, so we may have to push forward without.
I mean, I got the chat right there.
That works. That works. I don't need to see it. It's fine. As long as I have the chat right there.
I'm feeling blocky this morning. There's some nonsense going on.
I'm feeling
blocky. Yeah. I got my
got your finger on the
itchy trigger finger today.
All right, well, we're gonna see how that shakes out. We will see how that shakes out.
Somebody before we start the shit, I didn't. All the reason I knew about this is because someone reported the comments, but I was having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I don't see any evidence that the guys are guilty or that the guys are innocent. I'm like, oh, okay. And they said, why do you think they're innocent? And I said, well, there's lots of reasons. And I listed them.
Uh-huh.
And then they went to the other page, took screenshots of everything I said, and then said how it was something like he refused to answer my question about why he thinks they're innocent.
Wait, what?
When the screenshots of my answer was in the post, which got him booted, by the way, because you can't not allowed to screenshot in the group, and then said, and he blocked me. What a coward. I'm like, had I blocked you, you wouldn't be able to take screenshots.
Yeah.
And then they said that I basically called him an idiot. Now I'm calling them an idiot. But just so you know, I didn't call him an idiot that time. I didn't even know we were fighting. I thought we were having a normal conversation.
I guess you were provoked.
Yeah. Thought we were having a nice, normal conversation. And then the admins in the group were like, somebody reported this because this person is, putting screenshots up in another group and da da da. I'm like, what? Why did any of that happen?
Oh, no. Well, I just want to give a quick shout out to Jenna Marie, who may not be able to make it today. Shout out to Valeria, who is shouting out Jenna Marie. We are also shouting about Jenna Marie. Her boss is not as nice as Valeria's boss, who is Valeria. Now I want the whole backstory, because now I'm like, wait, is Valeria also Jenna Marie's boss and she's not letting her on? Is Jenna Marie Jenna Marie's boss and she's not letting herself on? What's the backstory?
I seriously just signed in and
uploads. I don't know why you're having a problem. What happens if you scroll down further? Also, is it necessary? Are you just doing it for the chat? Because I'd like to point out again that the chat's on that screen.
But now I'm frustrated. So
no, Zap, we got to move on because somebody's got a heart out and it ain't me.
Bob's got a heart on. It's 12:30.
Can't be talking about my bits in the shower.
Nope.
Very long today.
Agreed, Jennifer. And also, Jennifer has a dog named Sherlock, which I may not have known before. I feel like I would have remembered that.
All right, do we need to get into this then? While I continue to.
Oh yeah, are you going to be the grown up all of a sudden? You're like, come on, guys, come on! I've been sitting here waiting for you to get started.
It is weird. Yeah, go to your. Okay, I got a thing. Click on the 3 lines on the left, top left.
Boy,
go to subscriptions.
There
it is.
This is tough.
And look at that.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we know. Okie dokie.
Yep, it worked just fine.
Okay. Jenna Marie has an quote unquote actual boss. Well, we miss you, Jenna Marie.
Real boss.
Christy says people love to hate you, Bob. You're doing good. Yeah. Well.
Yeah,
I agree. I love to hate Bob.
That shit happens all the time. But what was so weird about it was nowhere in my brain did I think that we were having a hostile conversation. It was just like the person had said something about Jim Clemente. They're like, well, I agree with Jim Clemente that Becky was the target. And I was like, well, that's not what Jim Clemente thinks.
Right.
She's like, well, I didn't know the gender. This person says, well, I just re-listened to his 3-part episode, and that's what he said. I'm like, first of all, he's come back and talked more since he had more information, and that's not what he says at all. But even then, remember we had like 2 episodes where we made fun of the word bifurcated because we kept overusing it because he said it could be one or the other.
Yes.
And then apparently
I still think that needs to be a t-shirt.
Bifurcation.
Bifurcation.
Yeah. And then I was like, wait, what? This person claims I blocked them. I don't even know enough about them to have ever cared enough to block them, and says I never answered their question while posting the screenshot of my answer to their question.
Yeah. All right, let's get started.
Let's make a show. Yeah, I've got my son's getting his senior pictures today, and I'm going with him. So we need to leave. We got 45 minutes, 45 hard out. That's why I also limited the number of questions for you.
Well, great. I appreciate that. Why can't I see the whole? No. I'm not going down this road of what I can and can't see on YouTube. Okay. All right. Well, do you want to bring it back in? Yes, you do.
Sure. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. As you just heard, we have Zach back in the studio today. He's back from his assignment. And you can hear all about it on the Patreon. We don't have much time for nonsense today because I have my son, my oldest boy, is getting his senior pictures taken today, and I'm going with him. And so I've got a hard out in 45 minutes. That being said, I want to very quickly, do either of you guys have any first thoughts on hearing Christian's follow-up interview?
I mean, I don't have, Zach, you start.
I do not have much. It was extremely hard to hear for me. I mean, I tried my best. There was a few times where you could hear him kind of explaining where they were going. But other than that, it wasn't anything overwhelming to me.
So frustrated when I'm just leaning towards a lot that Leclerc just wasn't a good, I've like made it something like, oh, well, he clearly didn't think that they were involved, or he would have done this, or he thought this. And I'm thinking, I think he just wasn't great at his job. Like he's never listening for information ever.
Mm.
And they were like, he's like, so what'd you do that night? And Christian starts talking and he's like starting to lay things out, and then he interrupts him, and then starts having a side conversation. And why, when you know you're recording interviews, does he constantly want to be outside next to a busy road?
I mean, listen, they're doing their best. The important thing is he takes a lot of notes. Oh, snap. He doesn't take any notes. If memory serves.
Yeah.
Right? He also doesn't take notes.
He says that he did the entire case with 2 pages of notes.
Okay. I feel like sometimes he's onto stuff, and every once in a while I'll re-listen to an interview and be like, oh, good question. But then it doesn't necessarily get followed up on. Okay, so my opinion was, this is not going to shock anyone. I still felt like it seemed my favorite word to use about the teenagers in their interviews, totally guileless. I thought there was some interesting info about just the perspective of his dad and kind of his dad's experience with lie detectors. I thought was really interesting. Like it was interesting to actually hear that there was a family member who had a bad experience with a lie detector, because that's like the most justification I can imagine for being like, I don't want my kid to take a lie detector. Like I definitely don't trust them or whatever. I did want to ask you, had LeClaire already pulled Robert's phone records by this point? Because it seems like he's trying to get at something he already knows or suspects about the phones, and I just was wondering if you knew the answer to that.
I wish I did. I did at one point. Maybe Zach could find that in the case documents. I don't know even where to look. It would be one of the episodes where we talk about the phone records. Because I saw right as we were walking into the room today, I saw somebody on Facebook ask that question, and it's a good question.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I don't remember when they got, because my understanding, I believe that Christian's dad did like give them permission to get the phone record. So maybe they had Roberts and they didn't have Christian's.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about it. You know, in part of like LeClaire does. First of all, I want to point out like a couple people had made somebody who is very active on the fan page, and I love he has kind of a contrarian viewpoint to me on a lot of things, but is very well thought out and is very good at communicating his points. Shout out to Ed Logan.
I knew you were going to say Ed. He's great. Yeah.
Yeah, Ed's great. And then I think it was Ed that made the post, but like some people are like, it was Ed. I think where he was like comparing Christian's like first interview to his second interview and then like the second interview to the phone records. And it was a great analysis, but for me, my only thing is it was too many months later, and I'm sure like there are the people that'll be like, well, you're just giving a pass to them because you think you've heard me say this for season after season, whether people are guilty or innocent, like those kind of details, particularly if it wasn't a significant night for them because they weren't involved in the crime.
Right.
Those details are going to get mixed up. And like Christian, he was at the beginning, he's like, well, my memory would have been better.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
That being said, even in his first interview, and look for his post if you're on the fan page, because I can't remember off the top of my head, but there were some conflicts where he says like, you know, we were at home ignoring Becky's calls and like the time doesn't work for that. Like they couldn't have been home yet.
Oh, he said that in the first interview? Christian did?
I think so. You have to look at Ed's post, but
okay.
My point here is just that when you're looking at very specifics about like timing, when someone's being interviewed 3 months later, or 3.5, almost 4 months later, I just wouldn't put too much weight into that.
I also just felt like he was so like, I don't know, like I didn't feel like he was trying to stick to something he had said before. It felt like he just had was like, I probably would have. I mean, it reminded me a little bit of Corey's interview, but Corey's interview happened like a few days after the night in question, where he was like, I probably would have done this. I probably would have done this. Where it was very vague, but I was like, well, that's exactly what I would say months after something. I would just be like, what would I normally have done in that situation that I've sort of now forgotten?
Yeah.
Well, and it never sounded like he was trying to create an alibi, which in my opinion, that's what
I think he did himself no favors in the reverse.
If you're guilty, you're trying
to
create yourself an alibi. You're trying to put together a timeline, and he was absolutely all over the place, which to me leads like he has no clue when any of this happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Including the murder. Yeah,
I got the same impression, and I also just remembered I'm sending you on a fool's errand because I didn't post the actual documents.
I'm realizing it as I'm
they're just my documents, so don't worry about that. Finding those dates, but we'll look into that and we'll get into it later.
Okay.
But yeah, I got the same impression from him. And again, like people were talking about, the route. Well, he said he went this route and this route and this route. He even says like, I don't know, we would have went
he couldn't have sounded more
way,
like
and then went this way. The
maybe.
one question that Leclerc asked where I really wanted to catch the response was when he said, like, how these phones work, they tell us where you're at, so was there any reason your phone will tell you you were up in Pinion?
Yeah.
And it was if memory serves, his response to that was like, oh no, it'll never, like, he wasn't worried about that at all. When he was like, did you go here, and when he was talking about which route you took to go home, he's like, I don't know, it shouldn't say I was in Palm Desert, I don't know. But when he was like, well, will your phone show you, is there any reason? And Leclerc's doing kind of classic Reed stuff where he's like, let me give you an out, is there some other reason?
That's definitely what it felt like.
You would have been up in Pinion that day, and he's just like, nope, not at all.
And I also thought that his sort of candor with these guys was like much gentler than he often is. And I don't know, I don't need to read it. I mean, I don't mean to read anything into it, but he wasn't there at the beginning. And I felt like at the beginning, he was like really nice to Christian. I don't know. This doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying that could be his technique where he's mean to Javi, but he thinks Javi's innocent, and he's like really nice to Christian, who he thinks is guilty. I don't know, but well, let's get into these questions. Let's
real quick, I just want to point out, Pamela in the chat said she believes that Robert's records were pulled September 28th. So if that's the case, and I'll wait till if she responds in here beyond that. But if that's the case, they just pulled Roberts, and maybe they had Roberts and not Christians.
Gotcha. Well, that would make sense then. Like he finally got around to sort of looking back and reviewing those and like starting to wonder if they meant anything or something. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Bob, for doing the follow-up questions this week. I did not have a chance to reshuffle them. I like to be real type A and try to group them into categories and a certain kind of order reflective of the episode itself. So I might jump around a little bit, but I want to start with Sarah, who says, which individuals were given follow-up interviews in 2006, 2007? Were there any of the friends and colleagues of Vicky and John also given a second interview in the aftermath of the murder?
I don't think we have second interviews with anybody connected to John and Vicky. I could be wrong about that, but I don't recall coming here. So it was like at the very beginning, they interviewed some neighbors, they interviewed some coworkers of John's, coworkers of Vicky's, and then that was the end of that. And then I don't know what prompted. I think it was
Jennifer H. wants to know what prompted Leclerc to interview Christian 4 months after the crime. Is that what you're about to say?
Yes.
Shout out to Jennifer.
The impression I get, because we don't have documentation of that, the impression I get is that he just wanted to get a polygraph. You also hear him talking about Robert not wanting to take a polygraph. Unless I've missed it, I haven't heard in a report or an interview where that happened. So my assumption is that maybe he made a call to Robert and talked to his mom or talked to Robert, and Robert said, my mom, because it sounded like his mom was involved in that based on what Leclerc was saying here, that maybe Robert declined to take a polygraph, and then so he decided to go try with Christian to get a polygraph. So I don't know if that's what prompted it. But as far as the follow-up interviews in 2007, it's all the friend groups. Remember, we get like Bo Nash has another interview. There's more interviews. There's another interview with Claire, I think. I think there might be 2 more interviews with Claire, because I think one was late, like 2015. There might have been in 2007. And then in the fall of 2007, they bring Robert and Christian. That's when they serve. They get the DNA or the DNA result back on the business card, and then they serve search warrants on Robert and Christian's house, and they're interviewed that. And then it seems like things like after that, they're just like, I don't know, and then nothing happens after that until 2014.
Okay. Kristen H, this came up moments ago, but Kristen was also wondering if we know for sure if John Smith, truly the most generic name in the world. I remember someone commented on that day one of whenever the first interview was, if he actually did sign that consent for the phone records.
Yeah, I believe he did.
Okay. And then Sarah G and Kristen wanted to know who all were asked / pressured to take a polygraph. Obviously, we know that Jacob and Javi and Robert and Christian. We know that Ron took one and passed. Anybody else that?
I think you just answered the question. Yeah, because I was going to say, I know obviously we heard like multiple attempts to get Javier to take one, tried to get Jacob to take one, tried to get Austin to take one, Christian, Robert. So all those, and I don't know if there was anybody else that has to take one. What I know, the only person that actually took one was Ron Friedley. He's the only one that took and passed a poly.
They didn't ask Bo to, I guess.
I don't remember. I don't recall seeing that they asked Bo to take one. I think they might have, with a lot of the interviews, it's mentioned. So I think it might have been mentioned in one of Bo's. Like, yeah, well, one thing we can do is take a polygraph. Would you be willing to do that? You know, I feel like maybe that happened to one of Bo's and some other ones. The ones they were really like pushing it on was Robert, Christian, Javier, Jacob, Austin to take the polys, and none of them did.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe weren't, people felt weren't a great look for Christian in this. Leah C says, I feel this interview didn't do him any favors at all. Some of the things he said and the way he came across really didn't sound good. And I'm going to just piggyback on this comment from Georgina, who says Christian said he talked to Robert because it was important to have the same story. That drills a little bit deeper down into this idea of him saying some things that maybe don't make him look good. Poor choice of words, ? Georgina asks.
Yeah, well, like either both of you or one of you had said, like, yeah, he didn't do himself any favors in this. He didn't give them an alibi, didn't even attempt to give them an alibi, just kind of recounted some things. He says that he, they spoke and got their story straight. And then that's I think that's when like his dad comes in and gets interrupted. They don't get really to suss that fully out, what he's talking about. Yeah, it's a bad look, but it's also, it all depends on, I guess, the lens you're looking at it through. But remember let me give you what I think happened that night with these guys. And I want to be very clear. This is just kind of my gut feeling, what I think. This isn't like, there's no proof that this is what happened, but it's also not just based on, well, I think they're innocent, so they must. It's based on everything else we've looked at, all the reasons why I don't see how they could have even been connected to this crime. So if that's the case, looking at the evidence that we have, then what would have happened here? This is what I think happened. And it was after I kind of going back through Christian's interview and Robert's interview. I think Robert did have plans to hike with Becky that night. Mm-hmm. And Christian didn't know about them. I think that the plan for Robert was probably to come home, go up and see Becky. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's that 6:14 call that, yeah, I'm going to go up and see him. Well, then Christian says, I want to, let's hang out. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe Robert used church as an excuse to get rid of, well, I got to go to church, so I'm not. But then Christian says, well, I'll just go with you and then we'll hang out. So then Christian picks him up. So now Robert's kind of stuck because he's with Christian. Yeah. They go to the church isn't open, I think. And then Becky starts calling. I think most likely they shut their phones off. Yeah. That they like she calls him and calls him and calls him. Christian tries to call her back because he doesn't really know what's going on. And then Robert tells him, she wants to go on this hike. And I think that Robert probably played it down as though like she was bugging him. Yeah. And didn't really give the truth about that. Yeah, he planned on going. He's like, she wants me to go up hiking. I don't want to go. Just ignore her. I'm going to ignore her. Whatever. Christian tries to call her. She calls him back. And then she just keeps calling. We see those in the call record. I think they just, let's shut their phones off. And then they went about their night. In Robert's interview, which was the next day, Robert doesn't think he's being interviewed as a suspect. He contacted the police. Yeah. Because Javier told, they're trying to figure out what happened. Yeah. Javier told him that he had talked to the police. This is what happened. He had the planned hike. So Robert contacts the police, sits down, thinking I think, again, this is just my thoughts. He thinks he's just like helping them fill in blanks for
I agree
how the night went. Right. And so he's like, yeah, we had this plan and then we decided not to go and all this. And I think when we
and she told me some other guy was going to be there and you guys might not know that. And that might be important.
Right.
Which is a great thing to say if you're guilty and you're trying to throw shade into some nebulous person. It's great to come and present that. But it's also could be an indicator that he's, just like, how can I help? This is crazy. Like,
well, and we learned way back that there, in fact, was another person there. Javier said in his interview that she said, yes, you come too. And it wasn't until later, that 6:40 call, after she had already told Robert someone was going to be there, And that was, again, Javier confirmed that he was supposed to be there.
Right.
So when Robert talked to her at 6:14, Javier's supposed to be there. She tells him somebody else is coming. So yeah, but I don't think Robert knew it was Javier. He just knew someone else was going to be there.
But wasn't there some point at which it seemed clear to Javier that I thought that Becky had said Christian was going to be there, and that was part of why she wanted Javi to be there? Or am I just creating that memory? It seemed like Javi did know. Javi knew that Christian was supposed to be there. I just don't know if Javi, by the time he was asked about that, I can't remember if he had talked to Robert or not.
Yeah, he talked to Robert way before he talked to the police. He talked to him that morning on multiple
occasions.
He
talked to the police before his first interview with police. He had not yet talked to Robert, right?
I think we figured out he had.
Really?
Because originally we thought he talked to police at 8:30 in the morning. Then we found out, no, it wasn't until 12:30.
Right.
And there were calls back and forth to Robert before that.
The chat's going to help us with that, because I do not have the call logs in front of me.
Yeah. So in any case, when Robert's doing his interview, he's just giving them information. He's talking about it. I think that he lied in the interview in the fact just in the fact that he didn't want to let him know that this person who he's friends with that just got murdered, that he was blowing her off.
Right.
So he doesn't say anything about shutting his phone off or anything like. It does kind of say, yeah, we just decided not to go, but doesn't say we shut him off. So then this getting the stories together. So then 10 days pass before Christian gets interviewed. Mm-hmm. And of course they talk. My gut feeling is that, Robert's like, well, don't tell him we shut our phones off, because I told him we didn't shut our phones off. Uh-huh. Just that we were, so the bones of the story are there, but just make sure that you have that part correct. And because also, if he knows the one time when I caught in this interview where Christian seemed to be, he seemed to me to be uncomfortable and tripping up a little bit, was about, and he's like, no, I wouldn't have shut my phone up. Maybe Robert did. I mean, he could have, because he was tired of her calling. Like, that was the part where it seemed like there was something not quite right with me. But to me, it's similar to like Ed H, where there's like a lie about something that's not connected to the crime that then ends up making him look guilty.
Javi calls Robert at 10:25.
That's what I thought. He called him before he went up the hill. But anyway, so that to me, that's what I think happened. I think it was as simple as they shut their phones off because she wouldn't stop calling them, and they didn't want to go, and they didn't want to deal with it. And I think that's where we see some conflict in there. But again, that's just kind of how I see things, trying to take all the stuff we have and in a practical way put together how things might have shook out. That makes sense to it. Uli asked in the chat, which, by the way, I'm going to shout out Uli and Dylan here in just a second about something else they're doing. Why do I think that Robert wanted to go on the hike? Because you can see in the phone interactions, it's not at all one-sided. Right. Like, it's not like Robert is harassing her about doing it. It's not like she's harassing Robert about doing something. There's a pretty even distribution of back and forth between the two of them, which to me it doesn't indicate that Robert's like caught up in something he doesn't want to be caught up in. Right. So I'm thinking that he probably did want to go on the hike, but also keep in mind that shows there's no conflict there either as far as motive. Right. There seems to be a pretty even back and forth. And just real quick, I have the top of my head, Uli and Dylan Holmes on the family. Dylan is an architect from Australia who works with CAD, and Uli has been doing a fantastic job of really breaking down the photos and figuring where things at and all the information about the layout of the house. I kind of connected them together on Facebook Messenger and had them work together. So Uli's helping Dylan create a 3D CAD model of the house. I haven't looked at it. I'm in the group chat, but I haven't looked at it, but I've looked at some renditions along the way. It's pretty cool. I just want to, once they're done with it, figure out a way to move it, like put it into video form, because it's literally like you can take your mouse and walk through the house and see how it's laid out. So thank you for that hard work.
Shout out to Mish, who I think, I agree with you, Mish. I think it's possible that Christian did know about the hike. I mean, that's the only part of your thing that I'm pushing back on, is that I just feel like that doesn't mean that he knew for sure it was going to happen, but I feel like he knew that Becky wanted them to go or invited them, or
I think he did say Saturday, but in Christian's version, if I'm remembering correctly, I think in Christian's version, it was when she stopped by Saturday, she mentioned this hike and she left, and Robert was like, we're not going on that hike.
Got it. So it
So
was
I'm
not
not
that
saying
he
he
didn't
didn't
know the
know-
existence of it. He just didn't know that Robert actually planned on going.
And wanted to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is a classic, and I know this is a very heavy stuff, but like it is a classic John Travolta in Grease when he acts like he's not into Sandy, even though he was completely in love with her over the summer. I'm not saying that Robert was in love with Becky. I'm just saying that guys play it cool sometimes, where they're like, "What? No,
Yeah,
I don't care."
And Robert had a girlfriend too.
Oh, 100%.
At the time. And again, like, I'm not saying any of this is fact. I mean, some of Robert family members was like, why are you, but I'm just trying to be as fair as possible and look at like, what do I think?
Yeah.
And I think even that scenario came that I read somebody else, but I'm like, that does make the whole thing make sense if it was like, yeah, Robert was planning on just going up there and going on that hike. And then Christian wanted to hang out and he couldn't say, well, I'm not going because I'm going on the hike, because the night before he was like, I'm not going on that hike.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Shoot, we're going to run out of time and I want to touch on all these. Okay. So let's talk about these couple of things as well. Kristen says, what do you think about Christian saying he didn't remember turning his phone off when he went paintballing? We've talked about this a little bit. But if that's true and it's not about the conversation that he has about getting his story straight, quote unquote, Kristen does say, I think if you turned your phone off because Becky was bugging you and then you found out she and her family was murdered during the time you had your phone off, you would feel so bad thinking, if I just left my phone on, I could have helped. How would you ever forget that?
Do we know that he turned his phone off, or do we just believe he was out of service? Because I thought where they went to play paintball was out of service. Yeah,
well, we don't know anything. So the cell phone expert says that area has service, but he never drove back there to check. Many locals have told me, including, of course, obviously there's some bias there, but like Robert's mom works at that school and said still to this day it's a tough place for service. But they were only playing paintball for like 20 or 30 minutes, so that doesn't account for the entire amount of time that their phones were out of service. But for me, when I listened to that, and that's why I say, to me, the one place in that interview where I felt I was getting indicators of some deception was about shutting the phone off. He seemed to me uncomfortable talking about whether they shut the phone off. And keep in mind, he didn't say we did shut our phones off and he felt uncomfortable. It seemed to me that he was uncomfortable saying that we didn't shut our phones off. But that's reading tea leaves.
No, but there's, Montana and folks in the chat are saying it seemed like he was the most stumbly when he was being asked about not just his own activity, but Robert's, as if perhaps there was some sort of conversation about what was the right or wrong thing to say. And again, I know we can't say this is what I would have done, therefore it means this, this, and this, but we also always compare what we think we would have done. And I have been very open about saying I would have done everything wrong. I fully would have called my friend and been this is super weird. The cops talked to me. I feel really weird about this. I just want to make sure we both know what we did that night, because if you say something wrong and it's not it's a mistake, then they're gonna come. You know what I mean? I would just I would so immediately call a friend and be like, we better get our story straight, and be completely innocent.
Well, I think anyone would do that. The interesting part here is that Christian just tells them, yeah, we talked and got our story straight.
I know.
Where I think most people wouldn't do that. They would be
he literally said the words didn't he say it was important that we got our story straight. And Leclerc isn't even that bothered by it. Leclerc is well, yeah. Yeah. He's giving him these outs where he's and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like he's giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's well, I understand why you guys would want to make sure that you remembered right or whatever. He's pretty chill about that even. Okay, so this goes along the lines with that. It's about the phones and being turned off. Carl says, based on Christian's statement that they didn't get off work until probably 6:30 due to their suspension, and Christian having gone home first before going to Robert's and then watching TV for a period of time before going paintballing, shouldn't we expect to see more cell phone activity on their phone, as they should have had cell service at all times before getting close to the paintball location, with their activity ending at 7:17 or so. So that's again kind of taking maybe too much to heart about exactly what he says in that interview months later, but it's also great leaf blower. Perfect.
I think that what I just explained kind of answers that question. And again, we don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts on it too. And in the YouTube chat, Nicole says Becky told Javier the guys were on their way and she just got ready. If this is not true, why would Becky lie to Javier? Well, again, there's a lot of things going on there. One, I think Becky may have thought they were coming. If the scenario I just laid out is true, that when Robert spoke with Becky if remember, you got it pulled up, but I think it was like at 6:14, they talked for like 2.5 minutes. Is the only time Robert actually talked to her.
Yeah, 6:14.
6:14. Yeah. So if at that point, now Christian's not there yet, the trip to church hasn't happened yet, none of that's happened yet. If Robert's like, yeah, I'm going to go, I'll be up there in a little while, and whether Christians are coming or not, who knows? But then it's later when Becky tells him that, well, if they change their mind, and again, you said, why would Becky lie to Javier? Well, who says she did?
Right.
Because why couldn't it be that Javier is either lying about that, or Javier has like blended and mixed details? Because I'll tell you this, and we know this just from his interviews, and we're getting into his trial transcript soon. Like, he changes these stories and these details all the time. There's no kind of inconsistency there. So it could just be that he misremembered that, because he knows from talking to Robert that Christian was going with Robert. And so in his mind, Becky said Robert and Christian were coming, and I didn't even have to go look back and look exactly what he said. But that's, it could just be that he knew that, and then that became the story, not even intentionally lying about it.
Right.
But they get mixed together. So there's just, we're taking like, it's like, well, I'm going to believe him, but not him, and believe her, but not them. And, there's all these things. And there's just a lot of, certainly room for speculation, which is exactly what I've been doing, and a lot of other people are.
Yeah, I thought I'm having this memory of thinking that we had decided it actually seemed very plausible that she thought they were coming, they spoke, and then she tried to call Javi again after she blew up Robert and Christian's phones, which would suggest to me that they didn't show up. And she was like, where the fuck are you? What's going on? Why aren't you coming? Why did you say you didn't want to come, or whatever? And then she never gets a chance to tell Javi that, because she tries to call him and he doesn't have service, and then like they never talk again. I thought that that's sort of what we had figured out. The timing kind of worked out.
So the only time anyone spoke to Becky with Robert and Christian was at 6:14. It's like 2.5 minutes.
Right.
Robert talks to her. So say then the plan was to come.
Right.
So I think she would be expecting him by like 7.
Right.
Or so. And then by, during that time period between 7:10 and 7:30, around there is when she starts calling, the constant calling to me is a pretty good indicator that by then she had figured out they're not coming.
Right.
And then even then the call to Javier was, when we hear from Javier, he says, yeah, she wanted me to go. Then all of a sudden she was like, no, don't come. So they weren't coming. And then if she figured out they're not coming, that call could have even been, well, I guess they're not coming. So, or he's not coming, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But she never got a hold of him.
She never got a hold of him. Yeah. Okay. Nicole, speaking of the paintball, Nicole says, was the paintball gun collected or examined to see if it was actually jammed, or that it even existed? Was the friend ever asked if he gave it to him, that being Sam? Basically, was there ever any follow-up aside from the phone records to confirm the paintball story?
They didn't interview Sam until a long time later. And I don't think they even asked it. They thought that he was somehow, because he was talking to Robert that night, they thought that he was possibly involved. We had Sam on the show, so we confirmed it. Sam says that when he called that night, they were calling him, talking to him about the paintball gun and how it was still jammed up and it wasn't working.
Right.
And why you got that pulled up, Zach? What time was the Sam call that night?
Which one?
Sam to Robert.
It looks like 10 o'clock, unless there's one before that.
They actually spoke at some point. Robert. Okay. Well, we'll get back to that later.
I'll look for it.
Yeah. But yeah, he said, they talked and they had said that the paintball gun was still jammed.
40-second call at 7:04.
That was when they're on their way to church. Okay. We'll move on from that. But yeah, Sam.
7:06. They talked for 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. That must have been when they were on their way. So according to Sam, as far as we're looking at, if we're not cherry picking, but looking at the totality of the evidence, Sam tells us they told him that they were going to go check out the paintball gun or whatever it was. And we'll have to go back and you're looking at the ones that say Andrew Gayer, right? That's what it's listed under.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they said they were trying to go to church, decide not to go to church, they were going to go do paintball instead. They talked to Sam after 7 o'clock, when that would be when they would be heading up that direction. to go use the paintball gun.
Yeah. Okay. So Jack, I want to point out Jackie's question. Do you think Christian's dad seemed like maybe he needed his own validation with law enforcement, venting those details, as we talked about earlier, about the lie detector, yelling at Christian to tell the truth in front of the cops, that maybe that those exchanges didn't necessarily help Christian either in terms of like how he was coming off?
I don't know if they helped him or hurt him, but I think his dad was, I think he was being genuine. I think he was like, what, they interviewed you once and now they're back. What the fuck is going on?
Right.
And I think he's being genuine, saying like, if like you need to tell them if you know something.
Yeah.
I don't think it was for show or anything like that. I don't quite understand exactly what they're getting at with the question, but as far as did it help Christian? I mean, no, I don't think it. I would say neutral from my perspective.
Yeah. Okay, let me just. Sarah says, Leclerc's focus on Robert's church involvement felt like his focus on Javi's sexuality. I think Leclerc didn't believe Robert's claim of devotion to his faith in the way he didn't believe Javi's claim of a platonic relationship with Becky. He's looking for the reasons for what he believes to be a lie.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same thing. Yeah. Like again, I don't think that he's a particularly good investigator. I think that's the difference between an evidence-based investigation and a suspect-driven investigation, where like I feel like he comes to conclusions, and then what we see, and the reason we're also frustrated by his interviews is because the interviews are only to try to confirm his conclusion that he's already drawn, rather than just to gather information and learn more and gather more data.
Right.
Well, and I don't know that it matters whether he's that faith-based or not, because he could very well just be appeasing his mother, because we know that she's very devout, right?
Yeah.
So just because he's doing this doesn't necessarily mean, he could be just appeasing his parents.
Mm-hmm. And I think Christian even kind of hinted at that
in
the interview.
Yeah. Sarah K says, or KM says, I guess this is more hypothetical because we don't know, but Bob said before that Leclerc never seemed to think Robert and Christian were suspects. But then this episode, there's a comment that Leclerc thought Christian was covering for Robert. So why didn't he actually do more of an investigation on Robert?
Well, I still think that, I mean, I think it was a thought. Obviously it was a thought in his mind because he had no other leads. He didn't look in the places, in my opinion, that he should have been looking, which is like go to every single house in that neighborhood and talk to everybody, and look for any clues around there, really focus on everybody, not just Becky, John and Vicky more so. And so I think he's just grasping at straws. And so what happens is as they're walking outside, Christian's dad's talking to Leclerc, and he's like, well, what's the deal? Like, do you think he's a suspect? And he goes, no. He goes, what? And right. Christian's dad suggests, I believe is how it went down. He's like, so what do you think? He's just like covering for Robert or something? He goes, yeah, maybe, or something like that. It wasn't like, this is what I think. It was just right. Like in that conversation. And I'm sure he thought maybe that was the possibility.
Right. Jason says, do we know if Christian's girlfriend was ever pregnant around the time of the murders, presumably in reference to the business card?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Sorry, guys, doing some scrolling. Kelly, I want to welcome you to clean all of this up. I just want to invite you with my whole heart to clean this up, since I am trying to get everything kind of thematically linked. Sorry, Kelly. Sorry, everyone. Okay, I think we're getting close. Okay, this is more about kind of what might have happened, but Marion says, I'm still listening nonstop to get caught up. I just finished the Tiffany #2 episode, but suddenly I had an idea. Do you think that John was stashing his money in the house somewhere and the perps knew and went there to rob them, got resistance, killed Vicky and John as Becky was coming back into the house? Just a thought. And I would add too, that this is a theory that I think comes up a lot, and that's no shade on Marion. I think a lot of people tend to week, I see a lot of comments about that on Facebook, that there is this sort of pervasive idea that perhaps people knew about cash in the house and that this is a robbery gone wrong.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. Here's the thing though, we're getting more and more data points as we move through this, and I'm finding it there's and we're trying to fill in gaps as far as so particularly the last phone call Becky makes, right? Phone activity is at 7:37 p.m. and at 9:46 p.m. her body's lit on fire. So we got those 2 hours in there. And there's been lots and lots of conversation about what that means and what happened in those 2 hours. And up there at the crime scene, I think we have enough data points that we really need to focus. I don't think there's going to be much use in speculating about exactly what happened in those 2 hours without any further data points. And this is why, because you can shoot down any theory that, because it's just a black hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just gone. So like, I've had conversations on the page the other day where people were like, well, her phone activity stopped at 7:37. So that means the attack must have started then. I'm like, that's not what that means. Could mean that. Could mean a lot of things.
We don't even know if the phone activity stopped at 7:37.
Right. Because we don't see any of a lot of her outgoing calls are missing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, even if it did stop. So we say, yeah, it's people say, well, it's out of character for Becky to not, to have that. She uses her phone a lot all the time, but that doesn't mean it's every minute of every day. There are certainly hours and hours where she's not using it. And so I was like, okay, so is one possibility that the attack started at that point at 7:37? Yeah. Is it possible that Robert and Christian showed up at 7:37 and that's when they decided they left and went on a hike? Yeah. But also, is it possible at 7:37 her mom said, hey, Becky, will you come down here and help me get dinner ready? Or is it possible that she took a nap? Is it possible she went into the bathroom? Is it possible she went downstairs to complain to her mom and John about Robert not coming? Is it possible she got in her car and went somewhere? All of those things are and there's no and you literally cannot assign a value to any of them. It can't be like one's more probable than the other, because all we know, most likely know, is that she wasn't using the phone after 7:37. That's literally all we know. And there's a million possibilities out there. So we just look at the data points. What do we know? We know that the last time she used the phone was at 7:37. We know that John's body was upstairs when the fire started. I'm not able to commit on Vicky's about that.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the fire was started actually quite a bit before Becky's body was lit on fire at 9:46. Right. We know that when Becky's body was lit on fire, people had already called 911. The calls start coming into the fire department around 9:40.
Right.
She couldn't have been lit on fire till 9:46, probably, I think, closer to 9:50 or beyond.
Right.
So those are things that we know. And that was we were kind of in the pre-show talking a little bit about, like Jim Clemente kind of changing his opinion or narrowing his opinion more. One of the big things that was important to him was the realization that we hadn't clicked earlier, was that the house was lit on fire well before Becky was lit on fire. We don't know how far, because there's too many unknowns. We don't know if that was a window or the big thing is where Tim Summerly saw the fire. Was that a window into Becky's room, or was it a vent into an attic? If it was a vent into an attic, ceilings are typically hung with 5/8 inch drywall. A listener helped me out with this, and I looked it up. 5/8 inch drywall has a 1 hour fire rating. It takes a long time for fire to breach through drywall into an attic. But if it was a window, or if there was a break, or there was a lot of different factors there, but it was lit for a little bit before Becky's body was burned. And that was why Jim was like, well, if Becky was killed first, she would have been in the house. And then further conversations I've had with him since then, is that you think about it, if she's the target, she's the focus, she's the big deal, there's no fucking way that she is the last thing to be handled.
Right.
That would be the priority, not
yes.
Right after the fire's lit, there's fire trucks coming, lights are coming on. It's like, oh, now we got to deal with her. She would be handled first. Besides the fact that she should have been inside. So, but we know John's upstairs. We know the house was lit on fire first. We know where Becky's body was found, and we know at the very earliest at 9:46 was lit on fire. We know that starting at 9:40, all eyes, because people keep coming back to, why do you keep saying there was no car at the scene? I don't know that, but this is what I know. It's pitch black up there.
Right.
There's not a house anywhere around there, and it's a street that only has 3 houses on it.
Right.
So there's no reason for traffic up there. And by 9:40, people are noticing the fire and they're calling it. So now they are focused and looking at the house when she's lit on fire, when the perpetrators flee. There was at least 4 to 5 sets of eyes on the house when the perpetrators left, and not one of those people saw a vehicle leave. Could there be some world where one did and they just all missed it? Sure. Should there have been more follow-up so we would know that for sure by the police? Yes. But those are the facts that we know. And as far as what happened between 7:37 and 9:46, in what order and exactly who was moving and why the phone, like we just really can't come to any conclusions right now about that.
Right. Okay. Let me just skim through here. Sorry, everyone. This will never happen again. It might happen again, but I definitely
also,
don't
about
mean
4
for it.
minutes. So
I know. Okay, so here we go. From Tracy, and we're going to switch into some hardcore last names here. So let's all remember what everyone's last names are. Tracy says, why would Garcia lie about this? What would be the motivation? He didn't have access to Becky or Robert's phone records. Becky told Javier Garcia that she had spoken with Pape and Smith and that they were on their way to her house. Garcia testified to that fact. Phone records exposed Robert Pape's lies about relationship with Becky. We know that on September 14th, 2006 at 1:30 a.m., Pape initiates contact not knowing that Javier Garcia was with Becky. Becky was surprised that Pape was calling. Pape was unaware that Garcia could hear him through the phone and tells Becky, make sure your parents are not home, when talking about the hike.
Well, there's a lot there in that. A lot of that's not accurate. As far as,
I guess that's the first problem.
It's not entirely accurate, but I will tell you this: while we're so convinced about what Javier said and saw and heard, we're going to clear a lot of that up in this week's episode, because Sunday's main episode in 2 days, I'm going to be covering Javier Garcia's testimony, and you'll see that he doesn't agree with what that question said. So make sure you tune in on Sunday when we're going to get into Javier Garcia's trial testimony. And with that, I'm going to go take some pictures with my son for his senior pictures, and we're going to call this a day. Zach, thanks. Janet, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
YouTube chat. We love most.
Thanks, everybody in the chat.
Bye.
Bye.
End of audio. Shut off. Thank you, YouTube people. We appreciate